After my graduation, I returned from university and found the house empty with a sold sign out front. My parents left without notice. My stuff was in boxes on the driveway. "Handle it," my mom said. 1 year later, they begged me to erase their crimes. I refused. Now they're behind bars. Hi, my name is Madison Clark. I am 23 years old. That day, when I put on the navy blue gown of the University of Michigan and held the square cap in my hand, it felt as if my heart was about to burst from both nerves and happiness. 23 years of living, 4 years of relentless studying, countless nights awake with data, forecasting models, lines of code, and dense reports filled with numbers, all of it had led to this ceremony. I looked around the hall where hundreds of students sat neatly in rows, the lights from the high ceiling shining down on their radiant faces. The joyful atmosphere felt like a soaring symphony. Every round of applause, every cheer seemed to shake the entire space. Yet, in the middle of that crowd, I felt an emptiness I couldn't quite name. As I walked across the stage to receive my diploma, I glanced down into the audience where my parents should have been sitting. The seats reserved for my family were empty. To my left, my classmate Jenny was waving toward her parents who were filming and taking pictures, their eyes glowing with pride. On the other side, Michael, a friend from my research group, lifted his diploma high as his entire family roared in celebration. And me. All I heard was the sound of my own shoes striking the stage and the heavy echo of my heartbeat inside my chest. A few days before the ceremony, my mother had texted me, "We can't make it, sweetheart. Your father's work schedule won't allow it, and I'm tied up with some things. We'll celebrate when you come home." A short, emotionless message, so much so that I reread it several times, convincing myself she must have typed it in a rush, not out of indifference. I imagined that tonight, when I arrived back in Dallas, they would host a small celebration, with cake, with wine, and surely my father would ask me about the research award I had just received, the prestigious honor announced at the ceremony today. I had stepped onto the podium and accepted the glass plaque engraved with my name as the hall erupted in applause. That moment should have been my family's pride, yet none of them were there to witness it. I clutched the diploma tightly in my hands, feeling it was both an achievement and a form of comfort. I told myself it was fine, that I would bring it home, place it on the dining table, and show it to my parents. They would be proud, they would regret missing this moment, and I would forgive them. Because, after all, they were my family. I imagined my father serving me a piece of my favorite grilled meat, my mother preparing the sweet lemon tea I always drank after a long day, and the three of us sitting there, raising our glasses in celebration. In that imagination, the house in Dallas felt like a safe place waiting for me, even though I had been living far away for so long. When the music marking the end of the ceremony played and hundreds of caps flew into the air, I tossed mine too, hoping to release all the exhaustion and worries, keeping only the joy and anticipation. I snapped a few photos with friends, smiling as brightly as I could, though inside all I wanted was to get into the car and head straight to the airport. The night flight carried me away from Ann Arbor, along with all the excitement of an awaited reunion. On the plane, I opened my laptop and looked once more at the research paper that had won me the award. I thought of the moment I would tell my parents every detail, imagining my mother's eyes lighting up and my father nodding, as if he finally acknowledged my choice of field. I had even bought a small gift at the airport, a photo frame engraved with the words, "Proud Parents," meant to hold the picture of me in my graduation gown. I wanted to give it to them as a way of saying that everything I had achieved was only because I longed to see them proud. When the plane landed in Texas, my heart pounded wildly. I pulled my suitcase, clutching the photo frame tightly in my hand, and took a taxi straight to the familiar neighborhood. Along the way, every streetlight, every restaurant sign I had known for years stirred a flood of emotions inside me. I pictured my mother setting the table, my father opening a bottle of wine, and laughter about to fill the house where I had grown up. But when the taxi stopped in front of my street, my heart skipped a beat. Just a few months ago, I had FaceTimed my mother and seen her trimming the flower beds in the yard, while my father struggled with the pipes near the garage. Maplewood Street had always been alive with rows of bright maple trees, the air filled with the faint scent of freshly cut grass. Yet today, the first thing I saw was our lawn, dried out and patchy, its yellow stains looking as though it had been abandoned for weeks. I frowned, telling myself that maybe my parents were too busy, or perhaps away on a short vacation, and hadn't had time to tend to it. But when my eyes lifted to the second-floor window, where the navy curtains my mother had always loved once hung, my chest tightened. The curtains were gone, leaving only bare, empty panes of glass, cold and hollow, reflecting the glow of the streetlights. I leaned forward, my eyes widening as I caught sight of the sign staked into the front yard, a large, blood-red board with bold white letters. Sold. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. That sign seemed to tear apart every hope I had nurtured throughout the flight. I scrambled to find some reasonable explanation. Maybe my parents had just sold another property, maybe this was some kind of neighbor's prank. But then the taxi driver cleared his throat and asked, "Are you sure this is the address? 2417 Maplewood, right?" I nodded without thinking, then dragged my suitcase out. Every step on that once familiar street felt heavier than ever before. On the porch, the red geraniums my mother had lovingly tended were gone. In their place stood a messy row of cardboard boxes, some damp from the rain, marked with thick black marker. Madison's clothes, Madison's books, Madison's stuff. There were also huge black trash bags, inside which I glimpsed the edges of old book covers and the winter coats I'd worn in high school. My hands trembled as I set my suitcase down and bent to open one of the boxes. Inside were the notebooks I'd used during my freshman year of college, exam papers still covered in red scribbles. The musty scent of old paper rose to my nose, choking me. My entire life, my childhood, my memories, all of it was now piled up on the porch like something discarded. I looked up, and that was when I saw a loose sheet of paper taped right in the middle of the door, fluttering in the night breeze. I stepped closer, my hand trembling as I tore it off. On it were just a few words. "Handle it, Mom." I stood frozen, my eyes locked on the line, my heart pounding. It wasn't an apology, it wasn't an explanation. It was nothing more than a cold, indifferent command, as if everything that belonged to me was just a burden she had finally thrown off. My fingers shook as I dialed my mother's number. It took me 3 tries to actually hit the call button, my throat tight and dry. The ringing tone came first, then my mother's voice, familiar yet suddenly so distant, answered on the other end. "Hello? Who's this?" I swallowed hard, forcing myself to stay calm. "Mom, it's me. Madison. I'm standing in front of the house. Why is there a sold sign? Why is all my stuff out on the porch?" There was a brief silence on the other end, then a cool sigh. "Oh, that. We sold the house, it had to be quick. They offered a good price, we couldn't pass it up." End of 6. I stammered, but why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you call me just once? I just graduated, My mother cut me off, her voice flat, as if she were talking about picking up another bottle of milk at the grocery store. "We didn't want you to worry. Besides, you're 23 now. It's time to take care of yourself. This is an opportunity for you to grow up." I felt dizzy, unable to believe my ears. I gripped the phone tighter, my throat burning. "Mom, you left me? You and Dad both? What about my room? What about me?" I could faintly hear my father's voice somewhere in the background, but his words were unclear. My mother continued, "We need a new start. Your father's health can't handle the Texas climate anymore. Florida is better. You have to learn to stand on your own 2 feet. Don't make such a big deal out of it. I left all your things on the porch, nothing is missing. That's enough." "Oh, enough?" I gave a bitter laugh, tears spilling down my cheeks, my voice breaking apart. "You call abandoning me right after my graduation enough? Leaving me nothing but a note that says, 'Handle it'? I thought..." I stopped, unable to go on, the words splintering in my throat. On the other end, my mother's voice dropped, drained of any patience. "Listen, Madison. We raised you for 23 years. We paid your tuition. We gave you a roof over your head. Our obligation ends here. Now you take care of yourself. I'm busy, I have to meet the realtor. And then the call disconnected. The dark screen of my phone reflected my own face, pale, eyes rimmed red. I stood motionless at the door, still clutching the crumpled note in my hand. The night draped itself over the familiar street, and for the first time in my life, I felt like a stranger in the place that had once been home. The cardboard boxes sat silently beside me, witnesses to an unchangeable truth. I had been abandoned. And from that moment on, I knew nothing in my life would ever be the same again. I sank down on the porch steps, my back against the pile of boxes, my small suitcase still lying awkwardly at my feet. The night wind swept past, tugging the "handle it" note from my fingers and carrying it across the dry, withered lawn. I watched it flutter away as if it were the slip of paper that severed my entire childhood. Each breath I took grew heavier, my chest aching not from running but from something far worse. Humiliation. Just this morning, I had held a prestigious college diploma in my hands, not yet even able to savor the pride of it, and now, by nightfall, I was nothing more than a homeless daughter sitting on the porch of the house that used to be mine. I pulled out my phone and tried calling a few old friends. I dialed Jessica, my roommate of 4 years. On the other end came the automated message. The number you have dialed is currently unavailable. I tried Michael next, the one who had worked with me on our research project. He picked up, his voice cheerful. Madison, congratulations. I heard you won a big award. But I'm so sorry, I'm getting ready for a flight to New York in the morning. My new company wants me to start right away this week. I hesitated, about to tell him everything, but he spoke quickly. I'll call you back later, okay? And hung up. I went on calling a few more. Sarah was on her honeymoon after her wedding. David had gone back to his hometown in Minnesota, and Linda had just started her summer internship in Chicago. Everyone had a reason, everyone had a life waiting for them. And me, I had nothing but a pile of boxes left on the porch. Holding my phone, staring at the contact list on the screen, my heart clenched. I had spent all my college years studying, striving for the best grades, always believing that when I graduated at least I would have my family as a safety net. I hadn't built many relationships or created a wide network like other students did, because I believed that, in the end, after everything, my parents would still be the place I could return to. And now, the truth had slapped me straight in the face. Even my family had disappeared. The sound of crickets buzzed, cars hummed in the distance from the highway, while I sat there invisible among everything that once belonged to me. The sold sign in the yard glared like a bright red period at the end of a sentence, impossible to erase. I felt myself torn between two worlds, the dream world, where I was welcomed home with my parents' open arms, and the real world, where I was nothing more than an old, forgotten thing left out on the street. A strong gust of wind toppled the cardboard boxes, flapping their lids open to reveal a brown teddy bear, the one I had slept with every night throughout middle school. I reached for it, its fur worn, its plastic eyes slightly scratched, yet still carrying the faint scent of home. I pressed it to my chest, and for the first time in so long, I sobbed out loud. Not the silent crying of long exam nights, but deep, choking tears of pain and humiliation, as if the whole world had turned its back on me. I thought of my friends celebrating with their families, of the graduation parties filled with laughter and music. And here I was, a brand new graduate sitting in the middle of my own discarded belongings, in front of a house that now belonged to someone else. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the porch, my eyes fixed on the handle it note the wind had blown away, now lying across the dead grass. Those two words echoed again and again in my mind. Handle it, take care of it yourself. If before I still held on to a fragile hope that my parents' absence at my graduation was only temporary, that hope was now completely gone. I realized I had been officially left behind. And the most painful part wasn't that they left, it was how they left, quietly, coldly, without a single word of guidance or care. The next morning, as the sun climbed higher and cast its harsh rays over the withered lawn in front of the house, the sight around me grew even more unbearable. I sat there, surrounded by boxes of my discarded belongings, feeling like a homeless person on the very street where I had spent my childhood. The phone in my hand still felt hot after all the unanswered calls from the night before. I had tried reaching out to many old friends, but everyone had a reason. Everyone was busy with work, with their new lives after graduation. A vast emptiness opened up inside me, as if the world had shut every door in my face. In my confusion, I scrolled through my contacts, and my finger stopped on a name I hadn't thought about in a long time. Emily Torres. Emily had been my closest friend during freshman year. We had stayed up countless nights working on group projects, eaten cheap pizza after every exam, and cried together in our dorm when homesickness hit. After sophomore year, Emily moved back to Austin to pursue a startup project with her boyfriend, and our contact had faded. Yet at that moment, hers was the only name that felt possible to call. I took a deep breath, my hand trembling as I pressed the call button. The phone rang a few times, and when her familiar voice answered, my heart cracked open. Madison? Oh my God, it's been forever. How are you? I had planned to start with a polite greeting, but my throat closed up, and after only a heartbeat, I broke down crying. My sobs spilled through the line uncontrollably. Emily was silent for a moment, then her voice softened. What's going on? Calm down, tell me what happened. Through hiccuping breaths, I told her everything from returning after graduation and seeing the sold sign to the boxes on the porch, the cold note reading, "Handle it," and the brutal phone call with my mother. I spoke while shaking, my words faltering and breaking off at times under the weight of my tears. Emily didn't interrupt me. Every so often, she just let out a sigh, or a sharp, "Oh my God," filled with anger. When I finally finished, both ends of the line went silent for a few seconds. Then Emily spoke, her voice firm, steady, without the slightest hesitation. Madison, listen to me. Don't sit there another minute. Take what's most important to you. Get on a bus, or catch a ride right now. My place in Austin has a spare room. Stay as long as you need. I don't ever want to hear your voice sound like this again. I was stunned. While the whole world seemed to have turned its back on me, Emily was opening her arms. I stammered. But I don't want to intrude. You have your boyfriend, your project. I can't just. Emily cut me off, her tone sharp, unwavering. There's no such thing as intruding. You're my friend, Madison, my real friend. And I will not let you wander the streets like this. Do you understand me? I nodded over and over, even though she couldn't see me. A warmth spread through my chest, and for the first time in what felt like endless hours, I didn't feel completely alone anymore. I stood up, wiped my tears, and began choosing what to take with me. Opening each box, I weighed what I needed against what I could leave behind. My laptop, of course, that had to stay with me. It was the only tool I had to keep working and hold on to my career path. A few lightweight outfits, just enough to rotate for a couple of weeks. And the small wooden box my grandmother had left me before she passed away. Inside were a few handwritten letters, a silver necklace, and the ring she had always worn. My hands trembled as I held it to my chest and whispered, "Grandma, at least I still have you with me." The rest books, small keepsakes, a few photos, the old teddy bear I knew I couldn't carry at all. I arranged them neatly again, trying to pack them carefully into the boxes as a way of saying goodbye. The tears came back, but this time I didn't let myself drown in them. I knew I had to move. I zipped my suitcase shut, slung the laptop over my shoulder, and held the wooden box tight against my heart. Everything else, I left on the curb where my parents had already decided it belonged, as if it were trash. As I called for a ride out of Maplewood, I turned back one last time. The empty house stood silent under the sun, the sold sign still blazing red. I knew that, from this moment on, that place was no longer my home. I felt a deep cut in my chest, but at the same time, an invisible cord snapped, a cord that had tied me to people who had chosen to abandon me. I sat quietly, staring out the taxi window, my hand gripping my grandmother's box, and in my head Emily's voice echoed. "Bring your things here, My guest room is open. No. For the first time in 23 years, I understood something simple but heartbreaking. Sometimes family isn't the people who share your blood, but the ones who choose to stay when everyone else has walked away. And in that moment, I knew Emily was the hand pulling me back from the edge I had been falling into. Those first days in Austin, I still couldn't believe what had just happened was real. Waking up in the mornings on the sofa in Emily's living room, I often felt a hazy sense that it had all just been a nightmare, that any minute now I would return to Dallas, open the front door, and see my mother preparing breakfast. But every time I opened my eyes, the unfamiliar ceiling came into view, the hum of the air conditioner filled the silence, and the empty living room reminded me that my old life was gone. I was no longer the student with parents standing behind me. All I had left was myself. And I knew that if I wanted to survive, I had to start again from zero. Emily had been incredibly kind to let me stay, but I didn't want her kindness to become a burden. On my third day in Austin, I walked all over downtown looking for a part-time job. With my brand new degree in data analytics, I could have waited for a professional position, but waiting meant leaving myself empty, helpless. I needed income immediately. After several rejections, I walked into a small cafe on Congress Avenue, the scent of roasted coffee beans washing over me. I went straight to the counter and asked, "Are you hiring?" The manager, a woman with curly hair named Janet, looked me up and down before asking, "Do you have any experience as a barista?" I answered honestly, no, but I learned very quickly. Maybe she saw the determination in my eyes, because she nodded. "All right, you can start next week." 1. So that became my first job after being left behind. The days at the cafe were anything but easy. I had to learn everything from grinding beans and steaming milk to memorizing dozens of drink recipes with precise ratios. I spilled trays of cups more than once, drew complaints from customers, and fumbled constantly, but Janet never really yelled. She would only say, "If you make a mistake, fix it, just don't give up." And I clung to that sentence to keep going. By day, I wore an apron, forced a smile for customers, ran orders, mopped floors, and took out trash. No one there knew I had just graduated with an outstanding research award, that inside my bag was still the prestigious degree from the University of Michigan. Here, I was just a brand new barista learning how to earn minimum wage $1 at a time. But at night, when I took off the apron and returned to the small apartment Emily shared with me, I became someone else again. I opened my laptop, logged into freelance platforms, and accepted small data analysis jobs for a few startups. Most of the work was cleaning data, running forecasting models, or turning numbers into dashboards for their investor presentations. The pay wasn't much, but it was enough to remind me that I was still using my mind, that I was still Madison Clark, the girl who had chosen data analytics with the dream of changing the world through numbers. I often worked late into the night, my eyes burning, my head pounding from exhaustion. Many times Emily would wake up in the middle of the night, see me still at the screen, and whisper, "You're going to burn out." I would just smile, my voice hoarse. "I can't stop. If I stop, I'll fall apart." Outside of work, I signed myself up for an online course in cybersecurity. I knew that in the tech world, one skill alone wasn't enough. I wanted to be stronger, more versatile, so that no one could ever easily dismiss my worth again. Every night after finishing my freelance work, I opened the course materials and studied firewalls, encryption, and security vulnerabilities. I filled pages with notes, underlined keywords, and retook quizzes until my scores were perfect. Many nights my eyes blurred and my hands trembled from exhaustion, but I kept going. There were moments when I was so tired I just wanted to quit. Once, after being scolded by a customer for handing out the wrong drink, I ran into the restroom, gripped the edge of the sink, and cried. The humiliation washed over me. Why was a high-achieving graduate like me bowing my head to take insults from a stranger? But when I looked into the mirror, I saw my own red-rimmed eyes, messy hair, and a fierce determination staring back. I told myself, no one is ever going to betray me again. No one. How was it? That sentence became a vow I repeated every morning before heading to work. It was like a rope pulling me out of despair, forcing me to stand up. I began planning my finances carefully, recording every bit of income, every dollar saved. I also started building my portfolio, gathering all my freelance projects into one collection so that when a big opportunity came, I would be ready. Those months were harsh, but they forged me into someone new. I learned how to live with little, how to rely only on myself. Some days I ate nothing but instant noodles and discounted day-old bread, yet I still sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and worked. Some days my body ached after a 10-hour shift, yet I still forced myself to take another lesson on data encryption. Each night, when I lay down on the sofa, I fell asleep instantly from exhaustion, but in that restless sleep, I saw myself rebuilding my life one brick at a time. I knew this road would be long and lonely. But unlike those first days sitting among the boxes in Dallas, now I no longer felt completely invisible. I had a goal. I had work. I had knowledge slowly thickening day by day. And above all, I had a vow I would never forget. No one, not even my parents, would ever decide my fate again. I pushed myself to live hour by hour, using the rhythm of work to fill the hollow space inside. And yet, no matter how hard I tried, when night fell, when I shut my laptop and watched the city lights spill through the window, the same questions kept creeping back. Why did they do this to me? Were they so desperate they had no choice but to sell the house? Had I been so blind, so self-absorbed that I didn't see my parents' struggles? And if so, why didn't they say a single word, but left only that cold piece of paper instead? I had no answer. And I knew I might never have one for the rest of my life. Sometimes the pain didn't come from losing a home, but from the gnawing doubt that maybe it was my fault. I still thought, maybe they had a good reason. Maybe I'd missed something. That maybe clawed at me every night, like a needle scraping at my mind, keeping me from any real sleep. One afternoon, while I was sitting in the cafe's break room scrolling through my phone, I heard Brandon, my coworker on the same shift, let out a small laugh. "Hey, Madison, isn't your dad from Dallas?" I froze and turned to see him holding out his phone. On the screen was a photo posted on a Dallas community Facebook page, taken at a town meeting about expanding a city park. The caption showed the date, and my heart clenched when I saw it had been 3 days before I came back from Michigan. In the photo, sitting in the back row, unmistakable. My father, James Clark, hunched the way he always did, wearing his familiar silver-rimmed glasses, his eyes fixed on the stage. I went numb. My head spun, my heart pounding hard. I grabbed Brandon's phone, staring at the image even though it was grainy and blurred. There was no mistaking it. If he'd been in Dallas 3 days before I returned, then everything my mother had said, "We had to sell in a rush. We couldn't wait for you," had been a lie. There had been no urgency at all. They had planned it, prepared it, and deliberately abandoned me without even the courtesy of a warning. I let go of the phone, my hands trembling uncontrollably. Brandon looked at me, puzzled. "You okay? Did something happen?" I forced a shaky smile, trying to brush it off. "It's nothing, just surprising, that's all." But inside, it felt like my world had collapsed all over again. The needle of doubt had been pulled out, only to be replaced by a real knife, the truth that my parents hadn't been forced, hadn't acted out of circumstance, they had simply chosen to leave me behind. That night, I couldn't hold it in any longer. I stepped out onto Emily's balcony, phone in hand. After months of avoidance, I finally dialed my mother's number. My heart thrashed in my chest, each ring pounding against my temples. When the call connected, her voice came through, calm, so calm it made my skin crawl. "Madison? Why are you calling me now?" I drew in a long breath, fighting to keep my voice steady though it shook. "Why did you say you had to sell in a rush? Why did you tell me you couldn't wait? Dad was still in Dallas 3 days before I came back, wasn't he? I saw his photo at the community meeting. Why did you lie to me?" The silence stretched for a few seconds. I thought she might sound flustered or try to explain. But instead, her voice cut and sharp, laced with a mocking laugh. So what? The result's the same. We sold the house, we left. You should be grateful for that. Thanks to it, you're independent now, learning to take care of yourself. I staggered, tears spilling hot and fast. Grateful? You abandoned me right after graduation. You left me homeless on the porch of my own house. And you call that making me independent? My mother stayed silent for a moment, then let out a sigh as if the entire conversation were just some petty nuisance. You've always been too sensitive, Madison. We gave you 23 years of life. It's time for you to stand on your own. Stop blaming us. I broke down, feeling as if the last layer of my skin had been ripped away. My voice cracked, raw and trembling. From now on, don't call me your daughter. If you chose to abandon me, then consider me as if I never existed. I hung up before she could answer. In my hand, the phone vibrated over and over, missed calls, text messages. But I didn't open them. I went into settings and blocked every number from my parents. Then I deleted every email, every contact connected to my family. My hands trembled, but with each press of the delete button, my chest grew lighter. By the time I was done, my contacts list only held friends and colleagues. There was no trace left of the people who had given me life, raised me, and then left me behind. That night I sat alone on the balcony, the city lights stretching out before me. Inside, the pain no longer cut like a blade, it had become a cold, hollow space. I knew I had just severed the last thread that tied me to them. But somewhere deep down, a vague instinct still crept in. This wouldn't be the last time. People who choose to abandon often come back not out of love, but because they need something. And I understood that one day, my parents would return not with affection, but with desperation. After that final call, when I cut off all contact with my parents, an enormous emptiness opened up in my life. But it was in that emptiness that I began to discover a new strength. I no longer waited for a reconciliation call, no longer hoped for an apology text. Their silence became the clearest proof. They truly were no longer my support. And from that moment, I understood that if I wanted to stand firm, I had to build a new foundation, one of my own making, one no one could sell or take away from me. After nearly half a year of sleeping on Emily's living room sofa, I had saved enough to rent a small studio apartment on the outskirts of Austin. Barely 35 square meters, yet to me it was a monumental achievement. I still remember the morning I moved in, when I placed the new key in the palm of my hand and saw it gleam in the sunlight. It felt like a symbol of freedom. The 4 plain white walls, the slightly worn wooden floor, the window overlooking a parking lot, none of it was remarkable, but every detail belonged to me. This was a place where no one could ever tape a note saying, "Handle it," and abandon me again. During those days in the studio, I worked, studied, and saved every penny I could. In the mornings, I kept my shifts at the cafe. At night, I took on more freelance jobs, from writing data reports for an e-commerce store to helping a startup build its customer database system. Gradually, I gained a few loyal clients, and they recommended me to others. The income wasn't much yet, but it was enough to pay rent, cover living costs, and most importantly, give me a sense of true independence. I no longer felt like someone dependent. I was sustaining myself with my own skills. One day, I received an email from Professor Williams, the advisor who had guided my research project back at the University of Michigan. He had stumbled upon an analysis I posted on a professional forum and decided to reach out. "Madison," he wrote, "I always knew you had potential. I hear you've continued your studies? Have you ever thought about accelerating your program? I believe you could finish earlier." I read that email 3 times, my heart pounding. Finishing early, that was something I had never even considered, yet it was a door I suddenly longed to open. I called him right away. During our conversation, he laid out the details clearly. If I enrolled in summer courses, added a few extra online credits, and kept my grades high, I could shorten the program by at least a year. "It will be very demanding," he stressed, "but you are one of the few students I truly believe can handle it." I sat in silence for a few moments, then finally whispered, "Yes, I want to try." From that day on, I entered a new cycle, one far harsher than before. I worked my cafe shifts by day, freelanced at night, and crammed every remaining gap of time with academic texts, advanced coursework, and research materials. Some days I studied so intensely I forgot to eat, my eyes bloodshot from staring at the screen for hours on end. But instead of feeling broken, I felt as though I was forging myself in fire. Every new concept I mastered, every certificate I earned, became another layer of armor, shielding me from the fear of ever being abandoned again. Sometimes Emily would look at me and shake her head. "You're turning yourself into a machine," she'd say. I'd give a faint smile. Maybe. But at least machines don't get thrown away. The words left us both silent. Yet Emily understood, and I understood too. This was the only road left for me to heal. Gradually, those efforts began to bear fruit. A startup in Austin, one I had freelanced for, officially offered me a long-term position with far better pay. They needed someone who could handle data analysis and also advise on security. I accepted, turning my tiny studio into a makeshift home office. On the wall, I hung my degree and the cybersecurity certificate I had just earned. Every time I looked at them, it felt like I was writing a new version of my life. Some nights, sitting alone in that small room, I would remember the feeling of graduation day, looking down at the empty seats where my parents should have been, telling myself I'd make them proud when I came home. But now, I no longer craved that. I wanted to make myself proud. I wanted to look in the mirror and see a strong woman, someone no longer defined by anyone's rejection. And so, month after month, I moved closer to my goal. I registered for every summer credit, stayed up late, woke up early, and pushed myself through every challenge. Whenever I felt like I couldn't go on, I thought of the boxes on the porch, the handle it note, and my mother's cold voice. Then I clenched my fists and kept going. I would never again let anyone decide my future. A year after moving to Austin, sitting in my little studio and looking back at the road behind me, I realized I was no longer the girl left behind on a summer night in Dallas. I had become a new version of myself, resilient, independent, and strong. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I had started to truly live. And deep down, I knew this was only the beginning of my journey to claim my place in the wider world. I can still remember that night vividly. After a long shift at the cafe, I came back to my small studio, opened my laptop, and began finishing a data analysis project for a startup in Austin. I was focused when my phone started vibrating again and again. A message popped up from an unknown number, but the moment I glanced at the way the words were typed, I knew exactly who it was. "Madison, we're in trouble. You're the only one who can help." I went cold. After all those months of severing contact, I had built a fortress around myself. And now, just 4 short lines had brought back a flood of painful memories: the handle it note taped to the door, the boxes on the porch, and the nights I lay on Emily's sofa crying quietly into the dark. I set the phone down on the table, my heart in turmoil. Part of me wanted to throw it in the trash and shut it off like I had never seen the message, but another part urged me on. They needed me again. Not out of love, but out of desperation. I opened my laptop and began to search. Everything I had learned about data and information retrieval now became a tool to expose my own parents. After only a few hours, a clear picture emerged. After selling the Dallas house, they had used the proceeds and their savings to buy a villa worth nearly $700,000 in Florida. Social media photos from a relative showed them cruising, dining at upscale restaurants, flaunting a new car and new clothes. While I sat on the old porch with my suitcase, they were raising champagne flutes on a yacht. But in recent months, the traces showed a reversal. I found a small article reporting that James Clark, my father, was accused of being involved in a financial fraud scheme, a kind of Ponzi operation targeting retirees, promising huge returns from shady investments. The more I dug, the clearer it became. They were falling apart. Debts piling up, federal investigations, and the looming threat of court hearings. I sat motionless, my heart racing. It turned out none of it was accidental. They had left me, moved to Florida to enjoy luxury, And when everything collapsed, they came to me, the daughter they had ruthlessly abandoned, as their last lifeline. Another message arrived soon after. You have the skills. You can erase traces, reorganize the data, help us get out of this mess. Only you can do it. I stared at the screen, my hand trembling with anger. There was no apology. No remorse for what they had done. No mention of abandoning me that night in Dallas. Just a disguised command, help us escape. Once again, the memory of the handle it note came rushing back. I remembered my mother's handwriting, scrawled and cold, leaving me with a pile of boxes like some leftover shipment. I remembered the humiliation of sitting on the porch and crying. And I knew my answer this time couldn't be any different. Slowly, deliberately, pressing all the years of pain into each keystroke, I typed, "Handle it yourself. Learn how to be independent just like you taught me." When I hit send, a strange lightness spread through my body. It felt as if I had finally returned the lesson they had once forced on me through suffering. Independence. But this time it wasn't the cruel independence they had dumped on me, it was theirs, forcing them to face their own consequences. The phone vibrated again, more messages arriving one after another. I didn't open them. I simply blocked the number and set it down on the table. Outside the window, Austin's night still glowed with lights, the traffic streaming endlessly past. I looked at my reflection in the glass and saw a different Madison. No longer the girl crying on the porch of her old house. No longer the daughter blindly waiting for love from people who had never deserved it. I was a woman rewriting her life, step by step, decision by decision. But deep inside, I also knew one thing: they weren't finished. People like my parents, who've grown used to living off others, never truly learn how to stand up on their own. And when every other door finally shuts, they will come to me again, this time not with a text message, but with something even more desperate. And I would be ready. I thought that after blocking their number and sending my mother that cutting reply, everything would finally be over. I thought I could go on living in my small studio in Austin, working and studying each day, leaving behind the broken pieces of my past. But I was wrong. People who could abandon me so coldly were never the kind to take responsibility. They only knew how to find someone else to carry the weight for them. And this time, the name they chose was still mine. One September morning, while I was at the office of the startup where I worked part-time as a data analyst, the door opened and two men in black suits walked in with a brown-haired woman wearing an FBI badge. The air instantly grew heavy, and my coworkers looked on with a mix of curiosity and unease. The woman stepped closer, her voice firm. "Are you Madison Clark?" My heart raced as I nodded. "I'm Special Agent Sandra Martinez, and these are my colleagues. We'd like to speak with you regarding an investigation involving your parents." I froze. Out of old instinct, for a split second I wanted to deny any connection to James and Patricia Clark. But I stopped myself, drew in a deep breath, and kept my voice steady. "I'll cooperate. But I want a lawyer before I say anything." A few whispers rippled through the office, but Agent Martinez gave a slight nod, her eyes never leaving mine. "That is your right." That afternoon, I sat in an interrogation room at the Austin field office of the FBI, a lawyer beside me, the one I had hastily called from the legal aid list my university provided to alumni. In front of me sat a thick file. Agent Martinez opened it and flipped through page after page. "Your parents have stated that you personally manage their offshore accounts. They've submitted evidence claiming you have expertise in data and security, that you had the ability to conceal illicit funds." My chest tightened. I couldn't believe they had gone this far. I had thought they only wanted my help and, if I refused, they would find another way. But no, they had decided to drag me down into the mud with them. I clenched my jaw, forcing my voice to stay steady. "I have never helped them. I cut off contact 3 years ago. If necessary, I can provide all evidence to prove it." My lawyer placed a hand on the table and added, "My client will provide every piece of data, including emails, messages, and activity logs, to demonstrate she is completely uninvolved." It took me nearly 2 weeks to compile everything. From recordings of my final calls with them to the recent pleas I had ignored, I handed it all over to the investigators. I also provided my personal financial history, bank statements, rental invoices, wages from the cafe, and freelance contracts. Everything was transparent. Every dollar I earned was clean and modest, completely unrelated to the vast sums my parents were accused of hiding. The process drained me. Many nights I collapsed in front of my laptop, crying as I combed through every email, every line of text message. But the deeper I dug, the more I realized something. The same indifference and cruelty they had shown me in the past had now become the very evidence protecting me. Those cold words, "Handle it yourself," the recordings of my mother's detached voice, even the unanswered emails I had once written begging for an explanation, all of it now proved that our relationship had long since been broken. I had no ties left to them, except resentment. When the first hearing took place, I sat in the witness row and looked at my parents from afar. My father looked noticeably older, his hair grayer, his face drawn and tense. My mother still tried to keep her cold composure, but her eyes betrayed panic. Their lawyer tried to shift the blame onto me, insisting that as the younger one with technical skills, I must have been the hand behind the offshore accounts. But when the evidence I had submitted was presented, the desperate emails they had sent me, my financial statements, even the location data from my phone proving I had never set foot in Florida, their argument crumbled completely. I saw my mother lower her head, unable to face me. My father turned toward me, his eyes a strange mix of anger and pleading. But I no longer shed tears. I sat upright, my hands clenched tightly together, reminding myself, this is justice. The trial stretched on for months. Every time I was summoned, I appeared with my files in order. The more evidence I submitted, the tighter the court's grip became on my parents. They were not only tied to financial fraud, but also to perjury and deliberately framing another person to escape blame. Each time the prosecutor read out a new indictment, it felt like another chain tightening around them. And inside me, there was a complicated feeling, bitter, yet liberating. They had dug their own graves, tried to drag me down with them, but I had escaped. On the day the final sentence was delivered, I sat quietly in the courtroom. 15 years in federal prison, the judge declared firmly. That sound felt like a final period, closing everything that had once bound me to them. I didn't cheer, I didn't clap. I only exhaled slowly, as if releasing a weight that had pressed against my chest for 3 long years. As they were led away, my mother lifted her head and looked at me. It wasn't love or remorse, it was sharp, bitter blame. I knew then she would never change. My father opened his mouth as if to say something, but the officers escorted him out before he could. I turned my face away, unwilling to hear a single word more. Walking out of the courthouse that day, I lifted my head to the vast Texas sky, sunlight pouring down bright and fierce. Inside me, one thought echoed: I had saved myself. And from that moment on, I knew the life ahead would belong entirely to me, with no ghosts left to bind me. In the months that followed, I poured all my energy into studying and working. I followed the accelerated track exactly as Professor Williams had suggested. After relentless semesters, I finally completed the program in just 3.5 years instead of 4.5. I still remember the morning I walked into the auditorium for my second graduation, this time not at the University of Michigan, but at the special ceremony for students who had finished the accelerated track. I wore my gown, stepped onto the stage, and held my diploma with trembling hands. In that moment, I whispered to myself, family isn't where you're born, but where you find true respect and love. And I knew, this time, I wasn't waiting for my parents to appear in the audience. All I carried in my heart were the faces of Emily, of Brandon from the cafe, of the people who had truly stood by me. After the ceremony, I received the official news. A major tech company in San Francisco had sent me a job offer. They had discovered me through the research project I had once published, along with the freelance portfolio I had painstakingly built. When I read the words, "We are excited to welcome you on board," I broke down in tears. But these were the tears of a new Madison, not the girl abandoned with a handle-it note, but a woman who had built her own future with her mind, her grit, and her relentless effort. When I moved to San Francisco, I carried with me a suitcase, my laptop, and the small wooden box my grandmother had left behind, the only thing that still connected me to a sense of genuine family love. I rented a modest apartment shared with 3 friends who were launching a tech startup. The place was nothing luxurious, just a humble space with a living room crowded with laptops, whiteboards scribbled with ideas, and the constant scent of coffee in the air. But to me, it was heaven. Because there, every morning, I woke up to genuine greetings, shared simple meals filled with laughter, and lived as part of a family I had chosen. I began to rebuild the rhythm of my life. In the mornings, I went to work at the company's headquarters, a glass tower overlooking the San Francisco Bay. In the evenings, I sat with my startup friends, brainstorming ideas that often stretched past midnight. I felt like a machine that had once been broken, now reassembled, stronger and steadier. I no longer trembled at every shift, no longer craved recognition from those who had abandoned me. Instead, I had learned to recognize my own worth. One evening during a group meeting, Emily came to visit me in San Francisco. She looked around the cluttered but vibrant apartment, then turned to me with a smile. "See, I told you, you were never alone. You just had to keep walking, and the people who truly love you would be there." I hugged her tightly, and for the first time in years, I felt my heart settle into real peace. I knew my parents would spend the rest of their lives behind bars, and perhaps in their minds they still saw me as a traitor. But the truth was, I had never betrayed them. They had betrayed me first, betrayed the most sacred bond. The only thing I had done was learn how to survive and rise. And now, as I stood on the rooftop looking out at the glittering lights of San Francisco, I whispered, "I don't belong to that past anymore. I've found my true family." End of try. The ending wasn't the moment I cut ties with them. It was the moment I learned to heal and to believe that I was worthy of love. And now, as life opened wide before me, I knew I was ready, steady, free, and loved in the truest sense.